Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Better Than Food Book Reviews. It is hotter than hell in half of Georgia over here. I am in Florida, on the road, looking around, and I have stopped down here at Key West. I'm very happy today to tell you all about the incredible Floridian writer Harry Crews and his book, All We Need of Hell. My setup is kind of ridiculous. I mean, it's not even 9 a.m. and I'm already sweating like a pig, eating pork chops. I don't even know what that means. But I'm reading off of my phone today. Just using Google Docs and taking all my notes on my phone. Reading them back to you. Okay. So this is about a man who's trying. You remember that scene in Pulp Fiction at the end where Samuel L. Jackson is in the diner and he's holding the gun up at Tim Roth. And he's just like, he's giving him that whole quote and spiel about the Bible, and he's like, I'm trying, Ringo, but I'm trying to be the shepherd, you know? And that's what immediately popped into my head after finishing this book. It's just about a man who's trying. He's trying real hard. Duffy, the main character, he had been hurt doing everything he had ever done. He expected it, even wanted it. Nothing centered a man like pain. Nothing drove the irrelevant bullshit out of your mind like the taste of your own blood. Duffy had always wanted to tell people who were worried about the future of their children or about God and the order of the universe to go out and break a rib or two. A few broken ribs threw all thoughts of children and God and the order of the universe right out the window. Nobody with broken ribs ever had free-floating anxiety, or so Duffy was convinced. It was cheaper than a psychiatrist, and never so humiliating. I love it. What it had to do with was the fact that the world was a very dangerous place for any living thing. A simple, self-evident truth that everyone Duffy had ever known had tried to deny, except his father. Anytime Duffy cared to listen, he could hear his father's hoarse, beseeching voice. Embrace what cannot be changed. Hug it to yourself and make it your own. Duffy had taken him at his word and embraced the world with a vengeance, or at least he hoped that he had. Or at least he hoped he had. A man doesn't have 20 different disciplines, or 35 or 100, he often told his son. It is all one discipline, a solid tempered thing at the center of a man that is indestructible. The mystery that keeps you alive if you've got it, or that lets you die if you don't. I love that. You know, I'm just a sucker for that old, like, Southern violence grit. As I drink my Perrier and sip my espresso out of a styrofoam cup. No, but really, that's fantastic writing. Brief punches. Bim, 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 like Bukowski says. Writing should go bim, 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 bim. And it's definitely in that vein. Certainly if you're in any of the, the beats or any of that. This guy wasn't part of that. This was like early 90s, I think. I think this novel was published in 91 or 90 itself, 1990. But, certainly if you're like on that kick where you're reading Post Office, which I just reviewed by Bukowski, this is a great follow-up. It's perfect. Harry Crews is a good old red-blooded Floridian son of a bitch, whose writing is less like prose and more like target practice. I remember when I was a fat little kid, my grandfather was trying to strap one of those big super soaker guns around my distended little sunburnt belly. And he realized I had gained weight since the last time I'd been there, and then he took one look at me and just like looked me right in the eyes and said, "You've gotten fat," as if it had like appeared all of a sudden. And then of course I looked down like the kid in this book, and he keeps describing people in this book looking down and looking at their bellies as if it had just like occurred overnight. I was mortified, and let's not say by any means that this was the right way for my granddad to react in this situation to me gaining weight, nor the way to handle the situation, which was basically he did nothing, nobody did anything, continuing to give me complete and total free reign and access to extremely high caloric foods that eventually completely destroyed my body, made me totally self-conscious, and basically eliminated any kind of notion of a sexual encounter before I had realized what the fuck was going on in my adolescence. And instead of just teaching me to work out, instead of just teaching me a little bit of advice on taking care of myself. But I don't think any of the men in my family actually did know how to take care of themselves, and I don't think most Americans really know how the fuck to take care of themselves. Nobody taught me how to work out. I watched and I learned and I read and I hurt myself again and again and again. Not a victim, just a student. You can't talk around or introduce learned doctrine or something to get past getting 400 pounds down to your chest and back up in the air again. There's this great documentary on Harry Crews where he says that, and you guys gotta check it out. But why I told that story about myself was because basically Duffy's kid, in this book, this guy's kid is going through the exact same thing. He's just like eating candy bars like crazy. He's completely out of shape. He's soft, flatty, white slug, as he puts it in the book, which is cruel, and it is cruel to describe that, but it's the truth, right? You have to save your kids before they turn into fat teenagers and then eventually fat adults. He's struggling to get this kid interested in working out. So he forces him to work out one day, and this turns out to be a disastrous thing that results in this divorce. You guys just got to read the book to see what happens. And he's already juggling everything else, he's already got issues of his own, so when this happens, everything starts to compile, and you know how they say it comes in threes? Well, it just sort of like turns on like a tap or a faucet, and it just doesn't really stop coming for Duffy. Hence the title, All We Need of Hell. Sports has never really been my thing, and fitness only in the last few years. And maybe you'd never expect someone who is so punk to be so into sports. But when Harry Crews talks about sports, you begin to understand what the deal is, what the appeal is to so many people all over the world. Which is something I've been trying to understand ever since people started asking me if I ever played football. If you were willing to pay the price, you could make your body do anything. Nobody knew what it could be made to do. Discipline. Price, the body's enthusiasm. That was probably where God lived, in a hot muscle, strained beyond its limits. Duffy had never played a team sport in his life, but he had, goddammit, enthusiasm. He had enthusiasm, goddammit. I just love that line. It's a story about the disintegration of relationships of a man who's trying to hold it all together. But he's losing his temper. He's a Floridian lawyer whose co-worker is having an affair with his wife and is representing her in this forthcoming divorce. And this is enough to drive a man insane, but like I said, he's already dealing with all of his own other baggage. He's got anger management issues, and his son's getting out of shape, and he's trying to be a father to his son, but it's not working, and his son's not responding. You see, there's that writer, father, son thing again. Every writer's got daddy issues or is dealing with father issues in some capacity. I guarantee it. I bet money on it. And there you have this recipe for the bizarre vignettes to follow that illuminate the truth as only Harry Crews can. It's about failed ideals and waking up and realizing you're losing time, precious time. It's running out and you've been running in circles, and you're trying to get what needs to be done. And it's about your... Can you guess a word that I'm going to use that keeps popping up again and again and again and again and again? What do you think? The driving force behind all the actions of man. The fundamental neuroprocesses that are responsible for the greatest achievements in human history. The only thing at the wheel, the only thing driving. The only thing that forces one to focus when one doesn't even realize that one is being forced to. The thing that allows for the breakthroughs, for the epiphanies, the changes in consciousness, the muse-inspired drive, the full head-on set of neurotic, idiosyncratic impulses stemming from whatever minutia triggered it way back when in history. In a word, it's about your obsession. There's some sort of basic instinct in the human being that wants to see the act of something that ends in death, says James Dickey, the poet and writer, in this fantastic YouTube clip in the documentary on Harry Crews. Base is the word that I use to define Harry's writing. It's ultra base. Base in the sense that we're essentially all shit, right? We come from shit and we return to shit. And just as strong and noble and pure and brave as we believe all of ourselves to be, historically and presently, the truth of the matter is that we all return to shit. This is not, in the case of Crews, pessimism. That may be the greatest feature of his writing, my favorite part. What I love more than so much else in the literary world, right? in the illumination and meditation upon these facts and on the void, and the darkness and the violence of man and so on and so forth, it still doesn't come across as pessimistic, which is amazing. It's like you're talking to your favorite southern, slightly eccentric veteran uncle who's got every joke perfectly memorized and timed in his head. And he can pull it out and use it whenever he needs to, like a gun. He knows how to fight just as well as he knows Shakespeare, right? He's a southern gothic satirist. Harry's a one-of-a-kind man coming from Bacon County, Georgia, in the middle of nowhere, Depression era. Poor as dirt and riddled with all kinds of strife, making his own soap and shit like that. But eventually he was able to see all the beauty in those areas that he grew up, and all of that desperation and poverty. For all said, it all gets bad when it gets too bookish, according to Cruz, when he's talking about writing. Bad writing comes when it starts to sound too bookish. It ought to smell of sweat and blood. It ought not to smell of other books. I love that. Harry don't play that academic shit, even though he was actually an instructor. He could play that game if he wanted to, but he didn't. This guy's exactly what you think of when you hear the name Harry Cruz. It's a great novel. It's short, it's sweet, it's funny. Detailing this character, modeled after himself in some areas, I'm sure, of course, and discussing the only two things that really matter in life, which is sex and death. It often occurred to him that it was all probably meaningless anyway, a kind of game. But if it took a game to keep him alive, so be it. Whatever was necessary was necessary. Death, death, black-eyed, black dog, death. Everywhere in the life of Harry Cruz. Drunk for 10 years, as he puts it. Just plain old drunk for 10 years. Similar to the other drinkers, however, Cruz tells it like it is, right? He doesn't use it as a crutch or try to explain it. He wasn't an alcoholic because he was an artist or he needed to write. He was an alcoholic because he took some drinks and he got addicted and he fucked up. His father died, and then his mother married his father's brother, and so he was his stepfather, and then he left, he took off. Then he had some sort of weird childhood paralysis where he couldn't walk for a year, and then he fell into like a vat of boiling water used for slaughtered pigs. And then later on his son died from drowning. An easy life it was not for Harry Cruz. How do you like your blue-eyed boy, Mr. Death? It's a line from E. Cummings, tattooed on Harry's arm. Within the grit, within the Hemingwayan tough guy writer image, there's a real exceptionally intelligent man who was one of America's greatest and truest authentic weirdos. And these are his characters, freaks, as he calls them. You know? The Southern comedy directed by Todd Browning. All We Need of Hell concerns people just trying to get by, just trying to figure out how to take care of themselves and the ones they love. And even though everything doesn't really work out, it kind of does too, which I think is a lot how life actually goes. Somewhere along the way, he had made a wrong turn, walked out of a rainforest onto a desert. Sand stretched away to all his horizons, and he was without direction. But if he kept walking long enough and pressed hard enough, he told himself he would force his life to some conclusion. I don't know. Always remember that life is far too short to read bullshit. Put on sunscreen and I'll talk to you guys soon. Have a good one. Take care of yourselves. Ciao.